Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Adult. I'm a mechanical engineer, and today I wanted to show you how to play Polybridge 2. So I'm assuming you've made it this far. This is the first level of the game, and I'm assuming that you navigated to the Worlds tab and into the first level. But I'm going to show you some of the tools around the menu here that will make the game easier to navigate and hopefully make it less frustrating for you to use. So the first tool we're going to go over is in the pause menu, and that's the save bridge and load bridge option. So we can click save bridge, and if I already have a bridge saved here, but otherwise it's going to let you type in a name and then you'll click a green check mark. So it'll look like this. So I can go ahead and type in test and hit the green check mark, and then mine is already made, so I'm going to overwrite it. It is the same bridge, but it does still ask me if I want to overwrite it. So also up here we have the level info, which tells us our budget, the materials we can use on this level, and what vehicles in what order are going to move through the bridge. So this is the first level. It's fairly simple. We only have one car that's going to go, and our objective is always going to be to get some odd amount of vehicles on one side or both sides of the bridge, across the bridge, hitting any checkpoints along the way to their flags. So this level only has one car and one flag, so it's pretty simple. When we press play, this car is going to start driving to the right and come across until it hits the flag. So once you understand the basics of the level, we just need to go over some more tools before we really get into the nitty-gritty. This option up here is the snap to grid tool. We can turn it off and you can see the grid just disappeared, and now I can freely move any piece to any location. If I turn it back on, you'll see that it kind of snaps onto different parts of the grid, and it won't let me just put it anywhere in space. The other things we have here are the stress visibility option. So this only really comes into play once we start building bridges and testing them. So if I go ahead and start this one, you can see that the bridge pieces are green, and when I click this, they just turn into wood color and road color. So what this is actually showing us is how much force is going through each of the members, and essentially it's related to how close it is to braking. So when our bridge is green, that's a good sign. That means none of the pieces are close to breaking. What happens is they'll turn yellow and then red as they get close to breaking. So let me just demonstrate that. I'll just pull these triangles down a lot to a point where they'll break. And this bridge looks awful now, but you can see that this is turning red now, and as the car drives over it gets more red and breaks. So that's what the stress visibility tool is. Let's go ahead and load our bridge back up. Okay, so we also have this point of view up here, which also only comes into play when we start the simulation. So if we start it and then use these, we can pan to the right, pan to the left, and look straight on. I tend to like the straight on view just because it's easy to see what's going on, but you can mess with that and change it yourself. We can also freely pan by right-clicking when we're in this view, so that's another thing to note. But let's go ahead and put that back to front view. We can also view the replay. We have the budget right here, which the top number is the current cost of our bridge, and the lower number is the budget that we have for the level. So as long as your number on the top here is lower than the budget for the level, you're good and in the green. The level will let you go over budget to double the budget. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is as you're building levels, you might want to focus on getting a working design before you focus on getting under budget. That tends to work better. But we also have these tools over here to clear the bridge. We can just delete everything. But I tend to find it easier to actually right-click select the whole thing and press delete or D to delete the entire bridge. But we can also undo and redo, and there's always keyboard shortcuts for these things. So Y to redo, Z to undo. We can decrease and increase the simulation speed, And you can also just press space to start this. It tends to be easier than clicking this, in my opinion. But play it as you will. Both ways work. And when we adjust the speed, you can see that everything moves faster, slower. So we can go down to 20% speed and up to 300% speed. But this does mess with the physics, so be careful with this. If your bridge is close to breaking, I wouldn't change it from 100% because the game is actually coded to change the physics with the simulation speed. Okay, so that's all of the menu things that we have to go over. Now let's get into some more interesting things. So let's go ahead and build this bridge. So some of the tools we have is we can left click place, and I'm doing this with the grid on, but you could also do this with the grid off. And then we're gonna go ahead and left click place some wood here. And there's a reason that I'm placing it like this, and that is if we right click select this, and by the way, selecting a node will also select all of the pieces attached to it. So once we're here, we have a copy and a cut and a delete tool. So we're going to use the copy tool and go ahead and place a few more of these. And then I don't want the top piece on that last part, but I also have other tools, so I can flip horizontal and vertical as well as rotating. But what we want to do is flip horizontal. And that way, when we place this down, it'll overlap with this piece right here and won't place down a new piece. So once we're there, our bridge is done. But I would strongly recommend you use the copy and paste tools. They make your life a lot easier and faster, especially on symmetrical levels, because we can just copy and flip the bridge and place it down. And that way you only have to build half of the bridge by hand. Also, if you have repetitive triangles like this, do exactly like I did, build one triangle and then copy it and just click and place all of them down. It'll make your life a lot easier and it'll make the game a lot more enjoyable. Okay, so now that we've gone over the basics of how to navigate the game and what tools are available to you, we need to understand a little bit more about the order of things. So we're going to go to a more complicated level where a lot more stuff happens. So let's go to, say, this level. Okay, this is a good candidate here. So we can go to the level info, and you can see that our budget is higher, we have a lot more materials available to us, and it also gives us the order of things that are going to happen. So what happens in this level is A goes, which is the fire truck, is going to start driving across. And then once he hits the flag, we're going to go to B, which is a hydraulic phase. We'll talk more about hydraulics in a second, but hydraulics do occupy a phase of the level. And then once the hydraulics activate, then C, which is the boat here, is going to come through. And it will destroy any pieces of our bridge that are blocking it. But once C is done going through, we get another hydraulic phase, and then this E, the ambulance, will go across the bridge until it hits the flag. So that's about it. I mean, the game, it's pretty easy to follow. It goes A to Z, basically. I mean, it never goes to Z, but you get A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I think that's about as far as the game ever goes, though. So now that we understand the goal, we need to go over some basics of the bridges. So let's go back to the first level. So you can see these little red squares here. And what these are is static joints. And all that means is that they don't move. And no matter how much force you apply to here, how much stuff is supported by this joint, it doesn't move, it doesn't break. The things attached to it can break and move, but this piece, this point, never moves. And it's basically what we want to build all of our bridges off of. So once we understand static joints, we need to understand some of the materials that are involved. So let's go ahead and go back to that more complicated level. Where to go? Right here. Okay, so let's talk about the materials that we have to work with in this game. So we have roads, which their only purpose is to hold vehicles up, pretty much. They have a strength that is a little bit higher than wood, but their main purpose is to hold cars up. We also have reinforced road, which is more expensive, it's heavier, but it's also stronger than regular road. But it accomplishes essentially the same thing. It holds cars up, and it's a little bit stronger than road. Now over on the right we have our building materials, and this is where things get a little more interesting. So we have wood, which is kind of like your basic material. It's fairly cheap, it's very common, it's what you want to use for most of your levels. And a lot of the times it's the only material you'll be given besides roads, as we saw in the first level. We also have steel, which is more expensive than wood, but it's also stronger than wood. So this is useful for anywhere where wood supports break, and we need something a little stronger. We also have another option called muscles that we're going to talk about in a minute, but steel is a good replacement for wood. We have hydraulics, which are actually mobile pieces of the road, or the truss system, sorry. So what happens is, we saw that this level has 2 hydraulic phases, and the hydraulics are allowed to expand and contract up to 50%. So you can see I have a hydraulic placed right here in blue, and I have it set to expand 50%. So what that means is, in the B part of this level, this hydraulic is going to actually stretch out to 100 or 1.5 times its original length. And these hydraulics over here are also set to expand, and they're going to expand to 1.5 times their original length also. But you can also have them contract, and you can mess around with them and get all sorts of crazy motion out of them. I mean, I'm sure you've seen some other videos on YouTube of people creating some crazy stuff with those. Sorry guys, there were a couple things I missed the first time through about hydraulics. So I brought us to this level, which is, I believe, 1-2? 1-6. So the first drawbridge, and I'm going to show you the couple things I missed in the first time through. So let's go ahead and build a bridge here. So we put some roads down and throw some hydraulics on here, and we want the bridge to go up, not down, so we're going to change these to expand. The thing I forgot was, well, 2 things. The first one is this trace tool, and the purpose of the trace tool is to help you build arches in a way that is easy and makes sense. So what you want to do is make sure you have the right material selected, the material you want your arch to be built out of. So in my case that's wood, and then you're going to click this tool here, and you're going to click and make sure that it's the rounded shape. You can also use this to make lines, but I don't find that particularly useful, so we'll go ahead and make the rounded or arch shape. And you can change the length that you want each piece of the arch to be. So in our case it doesn't matter, we're going to leave it at 2, but you can bring it all the way down to 1, and for steel it'll go all the way up to 4 meters, I believe. But in our case we're just going to fill it, and then we're going to place some pieces down in the middle, and you can just hit escape to exit out of the tool. But then we're going to place our pieces down and make sure it all connects, and then we're just going to copy this and place it on the other side. And once you've done that, it's pretty simple to see the other thing I forgot. So I'm going to go ahead and press play on this bridge to let you guys see what I did wrong. So you can see as it lifts, the bridge kind of tears itself apart. That was actually kind of an elegant way to go. But the reason that it did that is because right here, we want the bridge to disconnect, but right now it's not set to disconnect. So what we need to do is double click, and you'll see that it turned yellow and green. And what this is it just made a split joint. So right here at this joint, the bridge is going to split as the hydraulics start to go. So you can see that we have 1s and 2s, and the 1s are going to stay connected to the 1s, and the 2s are going to stay connected to the 2s. So actually, let's go ahead and dangle a road here, just so you can see what I mean. So this one's set to 2, so it's going to hang on the right bridge, but now when we press play, you'll see that it lifts the bridge, and the 2s all stay connected together, and the 1s all stay connected together. And then the boat comes through, and then the hydraulics are going to come back down, and the 2 split joints are going to connect back together. And that yellow flash right there was the joint connecting back together. So that's important to keep in mind as you're building hydraulics, is like if I put a piece right here, then I gotta make sure that this piece splits up correctly when the bridge actually lifts up, or otherwise the bridge is just gonna tear itself apart again. So pretty much every time you use hydraulics, you're gonna need a split joint, unless the bridge is already separated. Just another thing to keep in mind. Okay, back to future me. But moving on, we have rope, which is basically wood, except it's a little bit more expensive and stronger, and rope can only work in tension. So if it's being pulled apart, then it'll hold weight, but if it's being pushed together, it just collapses and coils up on itself. It's just like rope in real life. And then we have cable, which is basically the cable is to rope as steel is to wood. It's just a little stronger, more expensive version of rope. And then the last material we have is springs. Springs are fairly complicated, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in the next video that I'm planning to make, which is the advanced polybridge guide. But springs, for now, all you need to know is they're good for shock absorbing. So if you have a car going off a jump onto a landing, or like in this case, we have a car, or our trucks are going to go off a little jump, and they're going to land harder than they took off. So that's why we have a lot of springs here, is to kind of take that impact off of the rest of the bridge and apply it slowly instead of all at once. So let's go ahead and play this level, and you can kind of see some things in action. So I'm going to slow it down so that I can explain some things. But right now we have A, which is the fire truck moving across. I believe he has to hit the checkpoint there, and then you can see the springs taking that impact and him moving on to the later portion of the bridge until he hits this flag. And once he hits the flag, then it'll move on to the next phase of the level. And you can see that he gets a little bit stuck, but it's fine. So now the hydraulics are moving. They're all expanding to 1.5 times their length, moving the bridge out of the way for that boat. And then the boat's gonna come through. And since our bridge doesn't interfere with the boat at all, we're good to go. Our bridge is still standing. Everything's looking good. And then what's gonna happen is the hydraulics are gonna lower back down. And as they lower back down, our bridge goes back into place, and then our ambulance is going to start moving as soon as they're done. Okay, so here comes the ambulance. We'll go ahead and speed this up a little, but he's going to come across just like the fire truck did, and the springs are going to absorb his impact again, and he's going to get to the flag just fine. And that's what this level looks like. So I hope you're starting to understand kind of the basics of this, the way that the levels work, and the different materials involved. But we also have some useful tools here. The first one I'm going to demonstrate by making my bridge fail. But once you fail the level, you can hit the try again, and this red box is going to go around the piece that broke first. So typically, if your bridge is built fairly well and you think it's going to stand, this is a good indicator that this piece is not strong enough for the bridge. The other thing you need to be careful of, though, and this is an engineering concept, is the stiffer and stronger you make a piece of a structure, the more force it's able to pass on to other pieces in the structure. So like in this case, maybe I still had this gone, and I decided to make this a reinforced road. Well, this doesn't always fix the problem, because now this road is able to transfer more force to the next piece. So maybe this piece of road breaks now, and we have to reinforce that one also. So you got to be careful, because this can kind of set off a chain reaction when you're just reinforcing pieces of your bridge. Okay, so the next thing we have to talk about is kind of the way that the game treats different pieces of the bridge. So these joints is what we're going to call them. The joints are treated as pins, and all that means is that basically they can handle a force, but if you twist on these at all, then they'll just kind of fall over and start rotating. So a good way to illustrate this is if I get rid of all of these pieces. So what's going to happen now is these pieces are free to rotate. So when I press play, and actually I might need to do this a little differently, because I was realizing that the bridge is probably just going to collapse if I run it like that. But let's say we build some supports underneath, and we just want kind of a diamond shape on all of them. So now when I press play, these are just going to swing to the side and swing back, and they're just going to freely rotate. Oh, and I need a piece right here. Okay, so they're just going to freely rotate like you just saw. They all rotated down, and this is the reason why squares are not good in this game, is because the joints are all pins, which means that they can freely rotate, and so squares don't actually hold it in place. They just kind of hold this joint at a constant radius. So this length here would be the radius that the joint is going to hold it at. But a square is just going to swing through that kind of circle that you can imagine until gravity or it bumping into something stops it. So stick to triangles. You might get lucky and have a one square in the middle work. Like maybe this will work. Ooh, it doesn't look great. Yeah, no. But yeah, triangles are the king of this game. The other thing is that arches are really good. And the reason for this is arches are really good at distributing a weight evenly. So we're getting a lot more force in this piece and this piece than the rest of the bridge. And that's the reason that we want to use arches, is this material out here is kind of extra and wasted. So what we can do is bring these down into more of an arch shape, and it'll distribute the load a little bit more evenly across the bridge and make it so that we're not wasting quite as much material. Okay, so if we do something like that, then you can see that now all of this arch is kind of turning a yellow-red as the car goes across, which means that we're wasting less material. The other thing that's really useful is what's called a muscle, or a diamond, depending on who you ask. But basically what we want to do with a muscle is replace a single piece with a diamond. And when we do this, we actually get the same amount of force going through two pieces instead of one. So when we do this, we have a lot stronger piece here. And it's actually cheaper to build a wood muscle than it is to build a piece of steel. So depending on how much you're trying to shave a budget, it's good to have put muscles in rather than steel. Okay, well that covers just about everything that I have for this tutorial. I hope it was helpful, and I will see you in the next one, in the advanced tutorial. Thank you for watching, and I'm Mr. Adult.